So this is my track for the Loopop competition. It's my first time using Ableton Light, so I guess one of the first things to mention is that there isn't any effects on any of the samples, purely because I didn't feel like that it needed them, and it seemed like a bit too much for me to learn. The track itself came about by me generating the samples in Decent Sampler and recording them, and then effectively arranging samples I'd created into the track. So there were very few samples were made to fill a specific purpose or function ahead of time. It was all about just generating interesting sounds and then trying to arrange them. So you can kind of see the legacy of part of that process with all these unused drum samples that are coming at the end of the after all the files, after all the tracks. Because I'm in Ableton Light, I was only able to use 8 tracks, so that kind of is a little bit of the limitations there. I guess interesting things perhaps about this, the initial start of the track was one of the earliest bits I did. I had this kind of, initially had this kind of desire to use the click, this click sample everywhere from the Heimbach samples, something that is present at the beginning and throughout most of the track, though often inaudible. These early drum samples formed some of the some of the first things I put down and arranged them. And when I was working on this bit in the early stages of the track, I was toying with the idea of trying to make, I guess it's free music, sort of without any sense of rhythm or polyrhythms. So that's the reason why these initial 3 structures of the samples are kind of a little bit higgledy-piggledy. The thought was maybe, well, I could do this without any rhythm whatsoever. As I iterated on the track, I eventually abandoned that idea. Though there are probably consequences of that in the way the track is put together. One of the another kind of tentpole sample is this kind of distorting Nymphas sample, which I basically made by just mashing my Arturia key step, and it made an interesting sound, and I quite like the way it distorted and was affected by the rapid key presses. And so from quite early on, that was another sample I kind of wanted to build the song around, which created problems for me later on. As you can see, I've tried to link the beginning and end of the songs together by using similar samples and patterns. There's a way of creating a callbacks. Another slightly interesting thing is this kind of drum fill which goes on, where as you can see I guess the 2 samples start out of time and gradually become a bit more in time until they're lined up. This is again a kind of me trying to play with the rhythm. Other than that, the only effects are I've reversed samples here and there, changed pitch a bit. There's nothing super fancy going on. As I said, I'm new to Ableton. I'm new to working with samples in this way. This is my first project in this manner. Usually I just play tracks and then punch in and punch out mistakes. other than reversing the odd sample here and there, there's not much going on. And perhaps a little bit of cutting it up to lengthen it. Those sort of little cheeky techniques to fill space and avoid the fear of silence. Which again, that was something I toyed with, whether just to leave blanks in the sound, but I thought that I didn't have enough momentum or rhythm behind the track to really carry that off. Perhaps one little observation here is, because this initial crescendo using this nymphs sample that I wanted to use wasn't quite long enough, and I didn't want to lengthen out. I actually just inserted this entire pink section in the middle, cutting and pasting, dragging the track apart like a car being lengthened to make a stretch limousine, and then inserted this drum fill and bass line, and that is perhaps one of the few musical bits of samples that I created with something in mind. Again, because I'm new to Ableton Live Lite, I just arranged everything by hand. So you can kind of see these kind of little snippets here and there of which are the legacy of me just copying and pasting and moving stuff around until I thought it sounded right. Other than that, my main approach was to listen to this endlessly until I was broadly happy with it. And I'm pleased with how it turned out. I like the sound of it. It might not be to everyone's taste. And I did have some plans to run this throughout board gear, but the rules kind of discouraged that. I thought it might be nice to perhaps put some of the drums through a filter or something like that, but in the end I don't think it particularly needed it. By the automations, you can see I focused on panning, so trying to pan things all over the place. I'm pretty new to panning, so I perhaps didn't do a fantastic job of it. Some hard pans in different places to try and place the sounds and keep the mix central. The odd little slight wiggle on the pan there, just as a little interest to myself. With most of these, what I did was to go through and manually adjust the gain on individual patches where I didn't like it. Some of the clicks towards the end were too loud, and as much as I like the sound of them, it sounded more like an audio glitch, a fault of the recording, than something deliberately musical, which is why I toned them down. But yes, a lot of just listening to it again and again and tweaking things. Probably the panning could be done better. I mostly listen to this on my iPhone speaker because that really makes certain frequencies jump out horrifically. So I like to check that it sounds good in that, and then on headphones and my laptop speakers to get a good range of fairly unforgiving sounds. Yeah, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope people found this interesting. As I said, I'm entirely new to this, so I'm sure there is lots, well, I know there is a lot I can still learn. Thank you.